Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Nava Milliken. I'm the Artistic Director for the Center for Art in Wood, and I'm joined by some really great people tonight. We are celebrating for the first time in history the opening and completion of the first winter residency program between the Center for Art in Wood and NextFab. And hang on, you're going to hear all about that in just a minute, but I do have a couple of things I need to say. Let's see. First of all, we're going to welcome tonight the first ever winter residency fellow, Colin Pezzano. But before I begin, we ask that you remain muted until the end of the program or are asked to unmute. One will come at some point in a few minutes at the end, near the end of the program. We encourage you to add any questions that you have for Colin in the chat, and then we will moderate that once he is finished delivering his talk. I would, however, like to recognize the Lenni Lenape, on whose traditional territory we, the Center for Art in Wood and NextFab North, are gathering. And we acknowledge that they are the past, present, and future caretakers of this land, and we are guests and stewards of that history. The Winter Residency Program is designed for artists in the greater Philadelphia area working in the medium of wood. The program is a collaboration between the Center for Art in Wood and NextFab. Reflecting our mutual support of environmental stewardship, the program requires that the resident fellow use reclaimed wood in at least 50% of the work created during the residency. So this resident fellow was selected through an ad hoc committee that came together to translate the values of the program into the selection of fellow and artist who would participate in the program. So our selection committee for this year, 2021, was Leila Cartier, Executive Director of Craft Now Philadelphia, Melissa Guglielmo, NextFab North Philadelphia Location Manager and Jewelry Supervisor, Ryan Hyde, the Assistant Directory of Member Services at NextFab, Nashade Jones, interdisciplinary artist and educator, and myself, the Artistic Director for the Center for Art in Wood. Special thanks this year for this program goes to Kelly McGovern of NextFab, who installed the exhibition, which is officially open today. We'd also like to thank Sarah Kazar and Sam Davis of the Center for Art in Wood, who documented the exhibition and created a tour of it so that you can view it from the comfort of your home or wherever you might be from your device. And we'll be sending links to that tour in the course of this program. And now I'm going to hand it over to Jess Eskow, who is here with us today. And Jess, take it away.
Thanks, Nava. Hello, everyone. I'm Jessica Eskow. I'm the partnership coordinator at NextFab. I organized this residency with Katie. So also special thanks to Katie Sorensen for facilitating all of this. It would not be able to happen without her. So internet applause for Katie. Very briefly, I just want to introduce Colin, who's the man of the hour and the artist. Colin Pezzano graduated from University of the Arts in 2014 with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Craft. He maintains and relies heavily on craft practices mixed with humor and pathos to define his work. In spring of 2015, Colin had his first solo show titled Contain You at Bridget Meyer Gallery. In 2018, he had his second solo show, Still Life with Dead Game, at the Allens Lane Art Center. In 2020, Colin worked with a group Past Present Projects on a storefront window installation titled We've Never Met. This was right on Fabric Row. If nobody saw this, or I don't know if it might still be there, it's absolutely astounding. He has also participated in group shows and juried exhibitions, attended residencies in the US and Sweden, and is a Wingate Fellow. Colin maintains his practice in South Philadelphia in his basement studio, which he is coming to from live. And his work is defined by craft processes. By carving and shaping material, he is able to connect actions and memories to the traditions of his predecessors and contribute to the collective knowledge of making. Since receiving his bachelor's, Colin has worked and taught in many different types of spaces, including universities, maker spaces, personal studios, and commercial shops. And we are all very excited to show his work tonight. I'm seeing a few NextFab crew here, so props to everyone. Mark, I see you making eyes. And I'm going to pass it over to Colin to just take it away.
All right. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Nava. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate all the help that you have all been throughout the residency. So I guess I'll get started on what the project was. The focus of the residency was to be using reclaimed materials. So I decided for this project to be using a door, a reclaimed door, and then carving into the door narrative based on the past year of, cycling through media, like podcasts, movies. I read a lot of comic books, and, current events, and intermixing all that stuff together into a stream of consciousness process of carving. So starting at the top and then working my way down without a clear idea of what exactly things are going to be, but referencing back to my sketchbook and the time that I was preparing before. A few other things that I made during this time were turned vessels, which were a collection of objects, vintage glass, and I collected my turnings from the past year and did sand art, kind of psychedelic interpretation of a turned vessel using the saved shavings. Here is the final installation with the door. And so the door is based off of Lorenzo Ghiberti's Gates of Paradise at the Florence Baptistry on the east side. And what my intention was here, through my research, I discovered that the gates were a commission by the city of Florence after the Black Plague. So I was kind of hoping of this being like some sort of magical process in bringing forward the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the carving is influenced by the Gates of Paradise, but I'm using references like the cloud in this shot is a drawing at the Home Depot down the street from my house that had was for an HVAC system and said the chill is coming for you. So repurposing this kind of dark omen into what was to happen later in the year. These are in this image, I have the telephone poles, like the city street kind of layout. And then on the right side is a temple. And then in the center is kind of a zoom in of the temple door. And I'm repurposing the Scooby-Doo, where are you eyes from the intro.
Colin,
Yes.
unfortunately, I don't have the last two. I didn't get those in.
Okay, that's fine.
Kind of zoom in on these if you'd like.
Yeah, that's fine.
Panels here. Can you guys see those okay?
Yeah. So the panel above this is 3 stars, which are referencing the stars that came earlier this year in Christmas, and people kind of clinging on to that idea as some kind of omen of good news or whatever you want to call it. Below that are flowers and kind of like in the weeds. and there is a sword that is on fire, and there are barrier gates. And then the bottom is a pile up of trash cans and recycling bins, and behind that is a brick wall. These are, I don't know if everyone knows the term Cootie Catcher. They're also known as fortune tellers, and they are crafts that are made when you are in grade school. I feel like everyone knows how to make these, but it's generally a folded up piece of paper with the colors red, blue, green, yellow on the outside, numbers on the inside. And after picking the numbers and letters, there's a fortune on the inside. And I thought of this kind of like going through this past year, a lot of people have been looking for things that aren't really going to give them real answers to their life or decision making. So kind of this like false sense of security object. So there's two of these on either side of the door. And these are the turned vessels from shavings of projects that I had done during the pandemic, several commissions for people or personal projects, and I collected the different species of material. So this vessel is basswood shavings, walnut, and cherry. And these are vintage glass. After doing some research, I found out in the bicentennial in Philadelphia, there were these specific glass jars that were made, these candy jars that kind of originated these apothecary jars that were shaped like the Liberty Bell. So out of the three, there is one that is Liberty Bell shaped. And I kind of hope that these objects would be kind of like appear from a distance as shiny turned objects, and just rethinking the idea of what a turned vessel is, because these are shavings from turnings. So I'm kind of reapplying the idea or the action into a different context. And then these are rubbing collages that I did off of the door as like an archival process to take from the door. I was looking at a lot of ancient objects and gravestone rubbings and was influenced by that process. And also, as a kid, having crayons and over coins and doing collages of coins. So I wanted to use this as an archival kind of result from the door. And these are just graphite on newsprint, and laying the paper over, rubbing the graphite, and then moving it into different places and making collages from different parts of the door.
Colin, do we want to go back to the main image here?
Yeah. So one thing I think that was really nice that I didn't necessarily expect, envisioning this installation, I thought this was going to look more religious or church-like, and it ended up being more domestic, which I thought was funny, because it kind of changed the context of the work, I thought. So yeah, that's basically all I have to say about the work right now. I would like to open it up if anyone has any questions so far.
Yeah, feel free to. Oh, here we go. First question from Heather. Can you talk about your use of Scooby-Doo imagery?
I am a very, very big Scooby-Doo fan. I like the different iterations of Scooby-Doo. I know that I watched the live action movies a lot through the pandemic. I watched a pup named Scooby-Doo through the pandemic. I watched Scooby-Doo, Where Are You a lot through the pandemic. Um, but I think this kind of like, I really love the intro of Scooby-Doo because the beginning is just this purple screen and the eyes slowly poking up in time with the music, and it's kind of just these like ominous eyes, and some of them are angry and some of them are sad, and it's like it's very mysterious. I'm very interested in the dark and the eyes showing through.
Very cool. Next question from Dave. Can you talk about the object subjects in the bottom 3 panels?
The objects in the bottom 3 panels. Do you mean what the imagery represents, or? 'Cause I can talk about that. Basically, I wanted to keep this kind of idea of this worry or chaos and a lot of like fast moving in a still image. So I wanted to talk about the issues such as the garbage men being underfunded throughout the pandemic and the trash piling up, and also this kind of like this unknown. There's a lot of darkness in the background of that panel, and then also talking about the protests over the summer with the sword and the fire and the barriers, and in the thick of it with the weeds and the flowers growing in the background.
Cool. Thank you. Next up, Gary asked, can you talk about the door installation?
The door installation was, I kind of thought about entries into, well, kind of the unknown when we started out at the pandemic. Maybe this is the door that you're approaching, or maybe this is the door that you're approaching on the way out. And, you know, how doorways are kind of the new start or the end of a period in your life. And there's the mystery behind the door. And that's kind of what I was thinking with using the door as the object.
Cool. Thank you. Next question. Molly asked, what is drawing you towards reinterpreting lined paper in wood? And actually, because I heard a little bit about your process with this and how you made that wood. So I'd love to hear all about that.
Oh, yes. So that was actually in a continuation of a project I was doing with Molly, where I wanted to, well, I think that my work jumps back and forth a lot between paper and wood, and trying to find some in between of that, and trying to have this trompe-l'oeil object coming through. Also in reference with the process of woodworking, of doing these glue ups. I mean, there's a lot of like butcher block kind of gluing up of materials to get different patterns. So this is something that I wanted to attempt. Yeah, just a different process, and trompe-l'oeil imagery, like objects, are something that I've been doing a lot lately in my work. So yeah.
Great. And this there's so Thora just asked, I'm not familiar with the term that's used here, but are the door panels just carved, or is there an element of intarsia?
So these are there's some, the process is somewhat of like woodblock carving, and then the other idea of it is like bas relief. So some things roll back into space, and then other things are just flat. So it has these different levels of depth to it.
Cool. And the last question is in the chat for now. Our very own Nava asked, stream of consciousness wood carving. What is it, and how does the process differ from other approaches to wood carving?
I think the difference is that I didn't really go in with a plan. I had my sketchbook that I'd been drawing in and pulling references from as I went, but it was mostly that I started off with a blank door and just started carving and didn't really focus on layout too much, or I didn't focus on thinking about the imagery too much. I just kind of let everything come to me as it went. And I would maybe lay down a few pencil lines, but other than that, it was mostly just carving only.
Nice, thank you. And actually, I have a question myself because I mean, I've been following your work for a while because, of course, you were a member at NextFab like years ago, and then just like seeing that, like how you've grown and all of that. And the past year, your stuff has just gotten completely just bonkers good. And but one thing you mentioned with the door in this installation is there is it looks like it has like a domestic kind of element. I've seen that in a lot of your other work, like the past present or thing in the window. That's a lot of like what you saw around your house, where you have the radiator, the quilt, all of that. Do you find yourself drawn to sort of like kind of that domestic type theme with your work, or is there something that you're just kind of like happen to just fall into that?
Well, I think a few things. I think one, definitely the influence of being inside my house for the past year has definitely shown through, the sense of being trapped a little bit. Um, but I think my work, being like going through a furniture program, I think that the work has always been domestic and maybe looks a little different now, but I think there's always been a focus on the domestic and where these objects reside. And now I'm kind of focusing more on recreating these objects instead of trying to make something completely up. If that
Very
makes
cool.
sense.
Yeah, definitely. Here's actually a good question from Thora. Since you live in South Philadelphia, there is a tradition of like tarting up the windows for holidays and family events. Was that part of your thinking at all? Have you ever been inspired by like Miracle on 13th Street or anything like that?
Um, yes, well, I love holidays. So we do that also. I'm a very big fan of Halloween decorations, Christmas decorations, lights, all that stuff. So I think that definitely has an influence on the work that I'm doing. Um, I think it's hard to live in an area and not be influenced by it, you know.
Yeah, I absolutely get that. I mean, and especially like in like a city like Philadelphia, I mean, you are surrounded by stimuli like everywhere you go, and that just like seeps into like everything that you do. And speaking of layers and seeping, Nav actually asked another question. This one is really interesting. There are a lot of layers and dualities in this installation: sacred versus profane, art versus children's games, intentionality versus chance, and sanctity versus domesticity. What led you to exploring all these oppositions in this work? Because, and I'm also really interested in this too, because I'm a visual artist myself. A lot of my stuff goes with like dualities and all of that. So what led you to like exploring these oppositions?
Huh. I don't know. I think that a big part of all this stuff is, my background. I mean, my family is from South Philadelphia. So spending a lot of time in these homes, I grew up Roman Catholic, so spending a lot of time in churches at an early age, I think I actually have been thinking about it a lot lately, questioning, why am I making things I make? I've always been doing it, even since I was a little kid. And I remember being in church as a kid and, obviously not being very interested as, 8-year-old. But looking around and seeing things, and just thinking to myself, I can make that. There's actually, I'll have to dig up the photos, but there is, when I was about 8, I made a replica of a crucifix and I wanted to put it on our front lawn, but it was like life size.
Oh
So
no.
I think yes, great choice. With like doll hair and everything. um, so I think that these things have been building up my entire life. And just, you know, falling into craft has given me a place to make the things that I want to make, if that
Great.
answers the question.
Very cool. Yeah, also another one that's really interesting. Molly asked another question. how does nostalgia play into your work, and what role does that play in it? Do you feel like it comes with like a sense of romanticism? Like you mentioned Scooby-Doo, you mentioned kind of like doing that, and like how that's like your, I feel like we all have a certain like safety net or like a, you know, a feel-good remedy for that. Like, do you feel that, you know, that nostalgia plays with like that sense of romanticism in that, like a simpler time?
I think that it can be difficult when you get into like nostalgia, because I feel like a lot of things are when you play with nostalgia, a lot of it seems like almost, hey, remember this? Wasn't this cool? But I think there's something that you can really tap into where it's, you know, things are going on when you're a kid and you're experiencing, like you're watching television, um, and it kind of becomes like linked together in this narrative in your head. And so you have like associations, it's word associations of these things you remember with a time in your life, and that creates its own narrative and takes its own shape, and you experience it your own way. So I think that's what it's more so playing to, is an idea of, hey, not only do you remember this, but where were you, what was going on in your life when this happened, you know, and it tells a bigger story for you.
Very cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. And I mean, I have a question, and this is something that always fascinates me. I mean, you did this, all of this, in 2 months, like start to
Yes.
finish, 2 months. You have a killer work ethic that I can only dream of having. Could you talk a little bit about like your time management and like how like your process and how you just really create the amazing photorealistic things that you do out of you know, out of wood? I mean, that paper, it looked like paper, and that takes like a lot of work. So I would love to hear all about how you approach something, like going into it. What is your, like, what kind of process, what kind of sketching do you have with that? You mentioned your sketchbook, and just like, and how do you find the time to do it all?
Um, I was very lucky to have um I didn't have many shop equipment when the pandemic first started, but I was happy that I had what I had. So during the pandemic, when everything shut down, I really decided that like I need to focus my time on what I really care about. So that was making art. So I spent a lot of my time in the basement. I would like be up till about like 3 a.m. working in the basement every day because there was nothing else to do. Um, and just finding out solutions of like what I could do to stay sane during this time. Um, I I don't know. I don't really feel a lot of the time that like I have like a great work ethic, because I think I'm so messy. I'll have like 5 projects going on at once, and you know, then I'll hit a point where I don't really have a solution for that yet. So then I'll think about you know, historic woodworking processes and how that relates to the object, or vice versa sometimes even. And I'll have an idea of a process that I want to do, and find a object that's not necessarily for that process and applying it there. So it's kind of a jump back and forth between objects and thinking of like, once again, watching TV and just kind of like letting my mind drift and thinking about how could I do that process and what would be the best way to do that. Um, yeah, that's kind of it.
I mean, do you ever kind of like find your bit like a follow? Do you ever find yourself like in like a zone? Because I know you, you and I have spoken about how you did the quilt, and like you were like sitting on like your bedroom floor for like 8 hours a day, like etching this thing. Like, do you like are do you have like a ritual to get into that sort of zone, or is it something that just like happens?
Um, it can be a zone. It could also be high anxiety and shame that motivate me to get work done. So there's,
Yep.
you know, there's a few different things that will get me to finish a project on time. I mean, for the quilt specifically, I was working on my bedroom floor, so when I wasn't working on it, it was staring at me. So I really was motivated, and maybe one day I wouldn't feel like doing enough, then it would just be staring at me, and I'd go, all right, I can do a few. So that was kind of,
that kind of like, it's almost like a not self-deprecating, but like, and not quite masochistic, maybe a blend of the two.
yeah, exactly.
And
But I
oh,
I
sorry, you
also
go.
feel like a lot of the process is just comes naturally, and um the the thing that I finish, there is always an answer there, or there's three other answers to go along with that. So I feel like I'm constantly thinking about things to make, and then if I don't get to that thing, it might fall off, and then maybe something else will come in. But there's always ideas that are like shifting through my my brain.
Very cool. Is there kind of like any do you want to elaborate a little bit on like the stuff that's shifting in your brain, or is it just like, again, like a, you know, going back to like that stream of consciousness thing that you do?
Um, well, I think that it's about what I want what I want to be doing in the next, year, 2 years, what I want to accomplish, and just going through that, and what are the small steps I could be taking to do that. So what is the next object that needs to happen to get to me to that point? Because I don't really feel like I can necessarily just jump from here to here, but more so there are objects in between that tell a greater narrative. Because I don't think that, even so, with making objects, I don't think that there's any one single object that's going to say everything that I want to say. So I think it's about the accumulation of objects.
Nice. I like that a lot. So we have a couple more questions from other folks of the part of the NextFab crew. Mark DeGiamo, the woodshop manager extraordinaire at NextFab, uh, is asking, there's the restriction of reclaimed materials, I think, fed easily into your motif of the familiar, where domestic household items certainly come to mind. I definitely think this is an expression of your experience through the past year. I wonder, what is next for you? Through the door at this moment of isolation, fear, and stagnation, and also like a collective turning point. Like, do you think you will continue to focus on the familiar and nostalgic, or consider the future in your work?
So what I've been thinking a lot about lately is occupying spaces, and I think the past two shows that I've had, being We've Never Met, with past and present projects, and this show Gateway with NextFab and Center for Art and Wood, I think that I'm getting more into an installation of like a domestic area. So what I'm working towards in that process is accumulation of objects, in the sense of setting a stage almost, like considering the objects in the space to be more of like props. For example, I actually have an example right here. I made a laptop. So
Is it, did you actually make that, or oh my god, you actually did make that?
yeah. So these are the kind of objects that I'm using, the carving process that I use for the quilt. I also have the thank you bag.
That, oh my god,
And then I
that's so
have,
awesome.
and then other objects like the bike locks. So these are like a little more refined than the carvings. But yeah, like focusing on accumulation of objects to set a scene and to tell a story, as if you're walking into somebody's house that they've just like abandoned. And I think that relates back to the idea of furniture as a placeholder for humans, using these objects made out of wood to be placeholders for humans and to tell a bigger story, or like a lineage of time.
That is awesome. I always love the idea of that. And I may have questions like later on, like next time you and I just like talk about the whole idea of like the placement and sort of like this idea like post-apocalyptic kind of thing. But let's do one more question, and then if you would like, you could show us around your studio a little bit. The last question is from Kelly McGovern, master of the Gallery 1800 and the textile studio there. And she
Yes.
asks, can you talk about your choice to replicate your wood carvings and charcoal rubbings opposed to the traditional way of replicating as print?
Well, I think that doing carving and doing woodblock style is a very tightrope to walk because I'm not a printmaker, so I'd be making bad prints basically, which I would like to stay away from.
Oh no, we got a bit of a freeze up.
Um,
Colin, are you with us? You're freezing up a little bit.
and yes.
You were glitching out a bit there.
We have you back.
Sorry. I was just saying, that it was also an attempt to not damage the door, basically, and using the reference of something like archival rubbings off of like carvings, basically, or gravestone rubbings.
Right, like I was thinking like gravestone rubbings, exactly what like I thought with that. So let's hold off on questions for a little bit now. I'd love to show if you could show us around your studio a little bit. I mean, since you are like in your like basement studio right now.
Yeah, so this is the basement of my South Philly home. So I'm gonna try to not make anyone too sick. So this is my kind of like collection of objects that I have that I've been working on or just have out for display, along with some storage cabinets that are just a bunch of like either trash picked or commissions that somebody never picked up, just all screwed together on a wall. This here is my storage, all my wood storage and my veneer storage, which is kind of messy. My Frankenstein head and my shelf for my drills, which are not down here right now. This is my spindle sander and disc sander. We have lathe over here and tool wall. Here we have toolbox, drill press, and you can see in the corner over here we have my dust collection system and sanding system. And this is a shelf just of a bunch of random stuff and the wrought iron railing from We Never Met. Back there's my planer and the rest of my basement. And my table saw over here. This is my chop saw outfeed and bandsaw. And then here's my workbench.
Nice. Could you go back a little bit to the wrought iron gate? Because I don't know if everyone here saw the show that was on, like the window show, because like that is like a really incredible piece.
Thank you.
It's like like how long like does like, so I'm sure you get on this a lot, like how long does like did like that piece like take? And like what, and was like all turning, or was there also some hand carving in there too?
There's actually no turning in this. I had a few ideas of how to get the twist that is mimicking the wrought iron. But after doing research, I figured out that in cane making, there's a process. There's a technique for the barley twist, and that's basically what I replicated using a microplane and just carving by hand. And then there is some bent lamination in there also.
That's cool. I mean, these processes, I mean, you have like such an eclectic like mix of processes. Are these like any that you kind of like were like professionally trained in, like in your other residencies and stuff like that, or is it stuff that you just like pick up?
Well, I went to University of the Arts for woodworking, so that kind of like set out a basis for us. Don Miller, who's here, taught us a very vast kind of set of skills, and then you forget those over time, and then you have to relearn them yourself. And then there's always techniques that are have always been around that you kind of dig up, depending on what you need to do.
Very cool. Also, I'd like to thank Don for showing Colin and your many students all these things. You're doing some really great work over there.
Thanks, Don.
All right, we have one more question from the from the audience. Is there a go-to property? It's from Thomas. Loria, is there a go-to property that separates an art object from a home furnishing? Thinking about like interrogating domestic space as the motivation for creating objects.
That's really tough when you get into replicating these objects. I guess considering that you're taking the functionality out of these objects is what makes them art objects. Because you're kind of rendering them useless and just breaking them down into their basic forms, and using them for narrative purposes only, opposed to their function.
Could you go a little bit more into when you say like narrative processes? Because I know, I mean, a lot of the stuff I do in my own spare time and also in my work definitely deals with like the narrative, and like a motto of in my life is like, you know, everyone has a story. So like, what are like some like examples of like the narrative processes that kind of go through when you're making these things?
Well, for something like the wrought iron, references also to the quilt, which is kind of an homage to the matriarchs of my family. So there are a few different objects. There is the quilt that was made by my great grandmother. There's the wrought iron that reflects my great grandmother, on my other side, her home in South Philly. And then there's a carving of Saint Anthony of Padua on the floor that is in reference to my great grandmother.
Do you think do you find a lot of inspiration with like your family?
Specifically lately, yes. I didn't really have many questions when I was younger, but now I've been, specifically since the pandemic and asking these questions. I know that it kind of started thanks to Heather at Past Present Projects asking us to make work about South Philadelphia, and that kind of led me to asking questions, digging up old tapes and going through them. So I think I have to thank Heather for that direction.
That's really cool. I know. I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, my grandmother passed when I was in high school, and there's like a lot of things that like I wish that I could like ask her. So that's so cool that like you're able to, ask those questions, get those stories, and really do that. Are there any other questions from? Sorry.
I was gonna say one thing that has been really interesting to me lately also is like family lore, where everyone has these stories, but a lot of them maybe never happened, or it's the wrong people in the story. So I really like this idea of the family creating their own myths, and passing them down incorrectly, or with the wrong people. I've been enjoying that also, and kind of like taking it with a grain of salt, everything.
Oh God, that's awesome. I love family myths. Do you have like a short one that you could share that may or may not be true?
Well, one of the stories is my grandfather was a very heavy smoker growing up, and it's unclear of which one of us said something, but they say it was me now. I used to think it was my brother, but that I confronted him on smoking, and then he was driving across the Walt Whitman Bridge and had a coughing fit and threw his cigarettes out the window, and that was the end of it.
Nice. That's constructive.
So, this one. It's a very it's a sweet one.
That's a cute one. All right. So yeah, we're almost at like 10 minutes till. So from Don Miller, any connection between these things and your music?
I think it depends on what kind of music that we're talking about. I have a few different projects that I've done in the past. There is one called Candy Coma, I think, that does kind of fit, where I'm pitch shifting my voice doing folk songs. And it's creating like a persona and going kind of into like the mythos, you know, of a character kind of thing. So I think that's kind of related in the idea of like family mythos and repurposing objects and stuff like that, if that makes sense.
Nice. And a question from Nava: what happens with your work now that the residency has concluded and we're banishing you back to the basement?
I don't really know yet. I have a few ideas. I don't really want to reveal yet as far as this work here, but you know, with I'm applying for a few things and hopefully objects will pop up. Oh, my grandfather's listening.
Yay! I called grandfather. Cool. All right. Yeah, we got about 10 minutes. Any other questions or any questions for either me about like NextFab and stuff, or to the center folks about the work that's happening there? Or would the center folks like talk about what's coming up?
We could do that. In terms of the residency, I'm gonna let Katie talk about that because I know this project is very, very close to her heart.
Yeah, we're really excited that this was able to happen with everything that happened this past year. It all started, you know, with just friends meeting over coffee and talking about what is possible. And Jess and I made it happen. So we want to thank, of course, everybody at NextFab and the Center for Art and Wood for helping us get it on on the books and out there. Applications will be opening later, beginning of summer, and early October. Notifications will be sent out, so we'll be letting everybody know when that's ready. So, you know, check out our website for more information on that. Stay in touch with us. We'll be posting that on social media, of course, notices in newsletters, and NextFab will also be posting about that. Yeah, we just want to thank everybody that was involved.
Yes, big love to all of you who helped facilitate this. Absolutely, especially to like the center, to the 1800 North America crew. You've been an absolute dream with dealing with all of like the last minute things and all of that. So thank you so much. And yeah, there's a lot of really cool things coming up between us and the center. There's a lot of things that like really awesome things coming up with NextFab, different programs, different residencies. A couple other like really big projects that we're not announcing yet, but definitely stay tuned to our social media pages, and we'll definitely be, you know, putting more information, stuff like that. Also, if you want to learn more about NextFab, I didn't go much into it because I didn't want to take the focus away from Colin, who of course is the star of the show tonight. But feel free to go to nextfab.com to find out information about our programs. We have virtual tours of the spaces that are really great. We also have in the chat, there's also the tour of Colin's the Gateway exhibit in the on the website, the Center for Art and Winter Residency website, that landing page. And it's been a delight. I'm really happy, as Katie was saying, like as soon as like we met, like, you know, it was like January of last year, like before everything hit, and we were right outside Cafe Olay right next to Center for Art and Wood. And like one of the first things that we said is we need to get a residency together. And here we are. So it's really cool. I'm really thankful that I'm able to do this as a job, and you know, create these things and work with really awesome people like Katie, Nava, and the rest of the crew over there.
She just muted her camera, but I just wanted to point out that she's responsible for our Matterport tour. And thank you, Sean Kelly, for helping us with equipment. Thank you. And Sam Sam Davis took beautiful stills. So thank you. And thank you for doing the social media for that. You guys rock.
And the exhibition is up at NextFab until
March 28th.
March 28th. So you have a few weeks to go see Colin's work.
Yeah.
Day
which
after
we
my
have.
birthday.
Oh, well, that's convenient. We'll have to have like a closing party.
Yes.
Yeah, it's cool. So it's anyone not familiar with that building, it's a really massive, cool space. It's right 1800 North American in that North American Street corridor. A lot of work went into it. It's 60,000 square feet. We take up half of it, and the other half is a bunch of other creative companies, organizations, BD American, which worked with Colin. Bob donated, gave you like that door, right? For that?
I bought it off Bob,
right,
but
yeah.
yes.
Resource Exchange is also there. It's right across the street from Provenance. We also have Keystone Bikes is there. We have the Cafe Sorina's is going to be coming in there soon, and a bunch of other like really cool organizations and groups there. So definitely check it out on the website. We have like that virtual tour, and also if you want to ask me any questions, I'll put my email in the chat, and then I'm always available. Whoop, that was the direct message. There we go, to the Center for Art and Wood. You guys already have mine. Okay, so yeah, my email is in the chat. So if anyone wants to ask any questions about any future programs or anything, drop me a line. And again, thank you so much to the Center for Art and Wood for facilitating this. Thank you, Nava, for being on the committee. Also, thank you, Ryan and Melissa. I don't know if you two are on here, but thank you that. And definitely thank you again to Kelly for setting up the gallery show. It looks absolutely amazing with all of that. And I feel every day being able to work with y'all is really fantastic.
Thanks, guys. If you want to come down to the center, we are open. You can come down and see our current exhibition, which is Tom Lozer, Please, 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 which will be up through July 24th. We're open Thursday through Saturday, noon to 5. So if you want to stop by and say hi, please do. Cool.
Thanks everyone for joining, and thank you, Colin Pezzano, for being the inaugural resident fellow for the NextFab Center for Art and Wood residency winter session. Thank you so much. It's been great learning experience, and I think we pulled it off.
I think we did too. I'm pretty sure we did. Did we? Everyone seems to be pretty satisfied with this. Also, I do not envy the next one because they have to follow up Colin. So
yeah. Very high bar. Very much. Well, everyone go see the show. It's really astounding work, and Colin is to be heavily congratulated. We will keep our eyes on you, Colin, to see what happens from the basement in the next few months, and keep in touch, everyone, and check in with us. And leave it with that. Have a good weekend. Be safe.
Everyone, thank you.
So long, everyone. Thank you so much.